brother announced it at Sunday dinner. Not a conversation, not a question, an announcement. We were all at my parents' house, the usual Sunday thing: pasta, the TV on in the background, my dad cutting bread the way he always does, thick, uneven slices that nobody ever complains about. My brother was talking about his wedding. The date was set, the venue was booked, the honeymoon was already planned. Costa Rica. 2 weeks. Private resort. And then he looked at me and said, almost as an afterthought, "We used your card for the deposit. Your family, so you get it, right?" I got it. I nodded. I said, "Sure." That was my first mistake. My name is Evelyn. I'm 31. I work in project management for a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas. I'm the only one in my family who moved away for a job and actually stayed. My brother, I'll call him by what he is, my older brother, lives 20 minutes from my parents. He works in sales. He's 4 years older than me, and he has spent most of my adult life treating my stability like it's a resource available to him. I should back up. My parents are good people. I want to say that clearly, because this story doesn't end well for them either, and I don't want you thinking they're villains. They're not. They're just people who raised two very different children and never quite figured out how to apply the same rules to both of us. My brother got grace. I got expectations. My brother got explanations. I got silence. Not because they loved him more. I genuinely don't believe that, but because he was louder about needing things and I was quieter, and somewhere along the way, quiet got confused with fine. I was always fine. I was fine when I paid for my own college. I was fine when I lent my brother $4,000 in 2019 so he could cover rent after he lost a job. I was fine when that loan became a gift because we never spoke of it again. I was fine when he asked me 2 Christmases ago to cover his car insurance for just 3 months, and it stretched to 8. I was fine when my mom called me and said delicately, "He's going through a lot right now," as though that explained why I was still waiting on 8 months of what I was owed. I was always fine. And fine people don't get asked. They get told. So when my brother said at Sunday dinner that he had used my card for the wedding deposit, not borrowed, not asked, not even mentioned beforehand, I nodded. Because I was fine. Here's what I didn't know yet. The deposit wasn't the only charge. I drove back to Austin that night, about 3 hours. I listened to a podcast about organizational systems, which is either very boring or very me, depending on who you ask. I got home around 11. I made tea. I opened my laptop to check some work emails. The banking app notification was already there, sitting in my phone's notification bar, which I'd been ignoring since I left my parents' driveway. I opened it. The deposit for the venue, $3,200. The catering down payment, $2,800. The florist retainer, $900. The honeymoon resort booking, $4, $100. Total, $11,000. Charged to my credit card. Over the course of the previous 4 days while I was at work, while I was living my regular Tuesday to Friday life, my brother had been booking his wedding on my visa. I sat there for a long time. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text. I just sat there with my tea getting cold, looking at $11,000 I had not agreed to spend. Here's the thing about being the fine one for a long time. You get really good at talking yourself out of your own reaction. I sat there and I watched my brain try to do it. Maybe he thought it was okay because I'd helped before. Maybe he planned to pay it back. Maybe this was a miscommunication. Maybe I was overreacting. I let myself go through all of those maybes. I really did. I gave them a fair hearing. And then I thought about the car insurance, 8 months, and the $4,000. And the time I flew home from my dad's knee surgery and my brother showed up for 2 hours and then left to handle something and I stayed the whole week and nobody mentioned it, not even once. Not to him. I closed every maybe. One by one. Then I called my credit card company. I didn't freeze the card yet. I just called to confirm the charges were there. The representative read them back to me, all four, and asked if I wanted to dispute any transactions. I said not yet. I said thank you. I hung up. I went to bed. I didn't sleep, but I went to bed. Monday morning, I called in a half day. Told my manager I had some personal things to handle. She's good about that. She didn't ask questions. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, and wrote out everything I was owed. Not just the $11,000. Everything. The 2019 loan, the car insurance, $200 from a trip we took together in 2021 where he said he'd Venmo me and never did. A birthday dinner I'd covered just this once. 3 years running. $16,400. Give or take. I looked at that number for a while. Then I called the venue. I explained that I was the cardholder on a recent deposit and that I had not authorized the charge. The woman on the phone was very professional. She said she'd need to flag the booking and speak to the event coordinator. She asked for my name and the last 4 digits of my card. I gave them to her. She said someone would be in touch by end of day. Then I called the catering company. Same conversation, almost word for word. Then the florist. The resort in Costa Rica was the last call. That one took longer. There's a specific process for unauthorized charges at international resort bookings. I didn't know that before that morning, but I do now. The representative walked me through it. I was calm. I said everything carefully. I wrote down every name, every reference number. It was 11:15 in the morning when I made the last call. I poured more coffee. I sat back down at my table, and then, because I still hadn't done it, I sent my brother a text. Just one. No paragraph, no explanation, no accusation. I saw the charges on my card. We need to talk before anything else gets booked. He called me 47 seconds later. Evie, hey. Okay, listen, I know how it looks. I let him talk. He talked for about 4 minutes. The gist was, he thought I would be fine with it. He knew I had the credit. He was going to tell me at dinner. He was going to pay me back. It was an investment in the family. He would have asked, but he knew I'd say yes anyway. He knew I'd say yes anyway. I said, I didn't say yes. You didn't ask. Come on, you know what I mean. I called the venue, I said. And the caterer. And the florist. There was a pause. What did you tell them? That I didn't authorize the charges. The pause got longer. I could hear him breathing. Evie. Evie. Why would you, this is my wedding. I know, I said. You should probably call them. I hung up. My phone started ringing again immediately. I put it face down and went to shower. By the time I was done, I had 14 missed calls. 6 from my brother, 4 from my mom, 2 from my dad, 1 from a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be my sister-in-law. Well, future sister-in-law, and 1 from my aunt who lives in Phoenix and had somehow already heard about this, which tells you everything you need to know about how fast information moves in my family. I texted my mom, I'll call you tonight. I'm okay. I did not call her that night. I needed 1 more day. By Tuesday afternoon, the fallout had fully landed. The venue had flagged the booking and put it on hold pending resolution of the charge dispute. The catering company had paused their services. The florist had refunded the retainer to my card and, per their policy, canceled the contract. The resort in Costa Rica had initiated a review process that, they explained to my brother when he called them, could take up to 10 business days. My brother's wedding, 4 months away, had essentially been put on pause. He drove to Austin. He didn't tell me he was coming. He just showed up at my apartment on Tuesday evening, knocking on my door like he was delivering something urgent. I looked through the peephole. I thought about not answering. I answered. He looked bad. Not like he'd been crying, but like he hadn't slept. His face had that stretched quality people get when they've been on the phone too long, making too many calls, saying the same things over and over. Can I come in? He said. I stepped aside. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd made my calls that Monday morning, and he put his head in his hands for a second. Then he looked up. I need you to fix this, he said. I said, I didn't break anything. Evie, come on. My wedding, your wedding was planned on my credit card without my permission, I said. $11,000. And that's on top of what you already owe me. We've talked about that, we haven't. We've never talked about it. You've just never paid it back. He looked at me like I'd said something unreasonable. That look? I've been seeing that look my whole life. It's the look that says, "Why are you making this complicated?" It's the look that says, "You were fine before. Why aren't you fine now?" It's the look of someone who has never been told no by me, who has absorbed over decades the certainty that my answer was always going to be yes. "I was going to pay you back," he said. "When?" He didn't answer. "The $4,000 from 2019, when?" Nothing. "The car insurance, 8 months, Evie." I wrote it all down, I said. $16,000. That's what it adds up to, everything included. "I'm not asking you for that tonight. I'm just telling you what I know." He sat there. "I'll call the venue," he said finally. "I'll give them a new card. We can move past this." "Okay," I said. "And the $11,000? "I'll pay you back. I swear. After the wedding, once we're back from the honeymoon, we'll work out a payment plan. After the honeymoon," I said. "The one you also booked on my card." He rubbed his face. "Evie, I need you to be reasonable here." There it is. There it always is. They ask for reasonableness from the person who has been reasonable for 15 years to the person who has taken that reasonableness and called it a standing invitation. "I am being reasonable," I said. "I'm not yelling. I'm not going to call the police over this." He flinched. "Good. But I'm not calling the vendors to reinstate anything until we have a real conversation. Not just a plan. An agreement. In writing." He stared at me. "In writing," I said again. "You want a contract with your own brother. I want documentation of a repayment agreement, yes." He left without signing anything. My mom called me that night. I answered this time. She was crying. Not loudly. My mom doesn't cry loudly. She was doing the quiet version, which is somehow harder to hear. She said she didn't understand what had happened. She said my brother was devastated. She said she'd never seen him like this. I said, "Mom, he spent $11,000 on my credit card without telling me." She said, "I know, honey, but—" "There isn't a but," I said. "There isn't a but after that sentence." She said, "He's your brother." And I said, "I know, and I love him, but I've been covering for him for 15 years, and this is the first time I've ever said no." She went quiet. "I don't want to ruin his wedding," I told her. "That's not what this is. But I need him to take me seriously. I need someone in this family to take me seriously." She said she talked to my dad. My dad called me the next morning. My dad is not a talker. He said, "I looked into what he did. That wasn't right." That was it. That was the whole call, almost. He said, "Do what you need to do." And then he said he'd see me at Thanksgiving, and he hung up. That's my dad. But it mattered. My brother called me 4 more times that week. I answered twice. The conversations were circular. He needed me to call the vendors. I needed an agreement in writing. He said I was being cold. I said I was being clear. Same loop, over and over. On the 9th day after that Sunday dinner, his future mother-in-law called me. I don't know how she got my number. She said she was calling because her daughter was devastated, that the wedding planning was in chaos, that she'd heard there was some misunderstanding about finances. She asked very politely if there was anything she could do to help resolve the situation. I told her the truth. I told her everything: the charges, the history, the $16,000, the conversation at my kitchen table. I was calm. I was factual. I didn't editorialize. There was a long silence. Then she said, "He told us you'd agree to help fund part of the wedding." I said, "I didn't." Another silence. Longer. She said, "I see." She didn't call me back. But 2 days later, my brother did, and his voice was different. Quieter. The push was gone. "I'm going to pay you back," he said. "I'm talking to a bank about a personal loan. For the full amount. Everything I owe you." "Okay," I said. "I need you to call the vendors. Send me the loan paperwork when it's approved," I said. "I'll call them the same day." He said that was fair. It took 11 more days. The loan came through, a personal loan to his bank, $16,400, the exact number I'd written on my notepad. I have no idea what his future mother-in-law said to him. I have no idea what conversations happened in that house during those 2 weeks. I don't need to know. He sent me a screenshot of the approval. I called the venue, the caterer, and the resort that afternoon. The florist's contract was gone. They'd already booked that date, and he had to find a new one. That was the one consequence that stuck. Every other vendor reinstated. The wedding went back on track. He paid me back 6 weeks later. The full amount transferred to my account in one transaction. I sent him a single text. Received. Thank you. He sent back a thumbs up. That was 4 months ago. The wedding happened. I went. I stood in the right place during the ceremony. I gave a toast that I had written and rewritten 7 times. I danced with my aunt from Phoenix and cried a little when they did the first dance because I'm still a person with a heart, regardless of what had happened. But something was different. Not bad different, just just. When my brother pulled me aside at the reception, glass of champagne in his hand, and said, "We good?" I looked at him and I said, "We're getting there." That was the most honest thing I'd said to him in years. He nodded. He didn't push it. Maybe that's growth. Maybe it's just that he understood for the first time that my fine has a limit and he'd found it. I flew back to Austin the next morning. Early flight, 6 a.m., the airport quiet and gray. I had a coffee from the terminal Starbucks, overpriced, slightly burnt, exactly what airport coffee always is. And I sat by my gate and looked at my phone, my banking app, my account, my money, all of it mine. I thought about that Sunday dinner. My brother's voice, so casual. "We used your card. Your family, so you get it, right?" I thought about the version of me who nodded and said sure. And I thought about the Monday morning at my kitchen table. The notepad, the phone calls, the reference numbers, the way my voice stayed steady through all of it, even when I didn't feel steady. Here's what I want to say. If you're watching this and you recognize any part of that Sunday dinner, being family doesn't mean being a resource. Love doesn't come with an unlimited line of credit, and the people who count on you to always be fine, who have built their plans on the certainty of your yes, they're not going to change until your yes stops being guaranteed. I'm not telling you to do what I did. Everyone's situation is different. There are dynamics and histories and things I don't know about your family. But I'll ask you this, and I mean it sincerely. When was the last time someone actually asked, before assuming you'd cover it? Think about that. And if you've got an answer that doesn't sit right, maybe it's time to do a little accounting of your own. Before you hit the like button or leave, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I genuinely love knowing where you all are. Drop it in the comments. And if this story hit close to home, share it. Someone you know might need to hear it today. I've thought a lot about that Sunday dinner. The pasta, the thick, uneven bread slices, my brother's voice so casual it barely registered as anything significant. "We used your card. Your family, so you get it, right?" And I nodded. I said sure. That nod didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the product of years of being the one who covered things, the one who understood, the one who was always fine. Every time I absorbed a cost without saying anything, I was teaching the people around me something. I was teaching them that my yes was automatic, that my silence meant consent, that Evelyn could be counted on, no questions asked, no notice required. I don't say that to be hard on myself. I say it because it's true, and I think the truth of it matters. What happened with the $11,000 didn't come out of nowhere. It was the logical end of a pattern I had helped build, one quiet agreement at a time. The $4,000 loan in 2019. The 8 months of car insurance. The dinners. The airport pickups. The week I stayed for my dad's surgery while my brother left after 2 hours and no one said a word about it. Every one of those moments was a small test, and every time I passed by saying nothing, the test got a little bigger. That's not cruelty. That's just how things work between people. We calibrate to each other. We learn what we can ask for and what we can't. And the lessons we teach are mostly the ones we don't mean to. My brother didn't wake up one morning and decide to exploit me. He just stopped being able to see the line, because I'd never drawn one. The Monday morning I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and wrote out $16,000. Something shifted in me. Not anger, exactly, more like clarity. I looked at that number and I understood that the problem wasn't that my brother was a bad person. The problem was that I had spent 15 years being so reasonable, so accommodating, so endlessly fine that I had made myself invisible. My needs, my limits, my money, all of it had quietly become secondary, not because anyone decided it should be, but because I had never insisted otherwise. Insisting felt uncomfortable. It still does, a little. There's a version of me that will probably always flinch slightly at the word in writing said to a family member, but I've come to believe that real care, the kind that actually sustains relationships over time, requires honesty more than it requires comfort. A yes that comes from fear of conflict isn't love. It's just fear with a smile on it. What I did wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that. I didn't want his wedding to fall apart. I wanted to be seen. I wanted one person in my family to reckon with what they'd taken, not out of malice, but out of habit. The easy, thoughtless habit of assuming I'd be fine. When the repayment came through, the full amount in one transfer, it wasn't the money that mattered most. It was what the money represented. It was proof that when I finally said, "This is the line held." That's the thing about boundaries. They don't work when you explain them. They only work when you enforce them. And the moment you do, everything around you recalibrates. People learn the new lesson, the same way they learned the old one. I'm still learning too. But I'm learning in the right direction now.